Well, we're joined now by Alpesh Patel from Profinium Partners here. Alpesh, let's start off, if we can, with the subject of Spain. I mean, the crucial question here, is this a resurgence of the Eurozone crisis? Do the authorities need to step in and restore confidence quickly or not?
It's a resurgence of the panic, not real crisis, because I don't think there is real crisis. And I'll tell you why. When I read this story, I immediately thought of 5 reasons why I'm not worried, one of which is China, through growth alone, produces a Spain every 18 months. When I look at the size of the EU economy, it's about the same size as the US, which means Spain is smaller than the state of California. Now, California's been on the brink of bankruptcy for a heck of a long time, and you don't see the Americans throwing up their arms and panicking. Not only that, the Spanish have, I think it's the 10th largest gold reserves in the world, and I know we'll get on to Italy as well, a bigger economy. They've got the 3rd largest gold reserves in the world. These are quite wealthy countries in terms of the assets that they hold. So that was just 1 or 2 of the reasons. By the way, Greece, which again is the one which has kicked all of this off, it's the same size as Washington State.
Yeah, but if you live in Spain and you are Spanish, you're still worried. Yes, and there's a new government as well, and its austerity measures have now got to kind of be implemented, and they've been very unpopular. We've seen protests in Madrid recently.
And you're absolutely right. If you're Spanish, you'll be worried. But in terms of a broader euro area crisis, in terms of affordability for either the Spanish nation, we're talking about just slightly over 5% is the interest rate the government's having to pay for the debt it's borrowing. That's still manageable. And in terms of the ability of the central bank and its resources in order for a bailout, were one needed, and Portugal's already had one, of course, their neighbours have had one, that's also manageable. So it's not as big a crisis as I think gets played out in the press.
This may well be the case. However, if the markets think it's a crisis, they can exacerbate matters by infecting Italy's debt as well, and then it does become a real problem.
And the market has, of course, tried that for real reasons or for reasons of profitability and perception, of course, with Greece. But it's not getting away with it at the moment because, as I say, if yields only the highest they've been since November, the last 6 months, that's certainly not crisis levels, and 5% is manageable. If you're looking at 7 or 8%, then you'd be looking at defaults and you'd be looking at emergency cash measures. We're nowhere near that at the moment. And so the market, even if it does think there's a way for so-called vulture funds or whoever else it might be with negative intentions, they simply don't seem to have the firepower to be able to get away with that.
Okay, onto the front page of the Times. We're seeing a new kind of openness. I don't think we've quite seen this much openness, particularly in a political electoral campaign with the battle for London Mayor going public with their tax returns. This follows that radio debate and the Newsnight debate on the BBC between Boris Johnson and Ken Livingstone.
Yes, the notion here is that it's the Americanisation, and the reason for that claim is, and you will know, is 1967. Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, stood as presidential candidate and revealed 12 years' worth of tax records, something which his son, Mitt Romney, has singularly failed to do, and only after quite a lot of pressure has revealed 1 year.
Was the tactic there to bore everybody into submission?
12 years' worth of tax records, can you believe it? Well, obviously, you're going to do it if you think you're not going to be criticised. Whereas I think the problem here is that I don't think the candidates will fear legitimate criticism. I think the problem is it becomes a criticism about envy, look at how much you're earning. There is no allegation of criminality, and therefore why at all is it relevant? If there's not an allegation of criminality, why should it be disclosed publicly so that people can make mischief? Because I think that's actually the root cause of why most people are interested in seeing these tax returns. I just cannot see any legitimate reason why it should be disclosed other than for one individual, one candidate, to try and embarrass the other candidate. That's got nothing to do with governability, got nothing to do with qualifications of the job or skills of the job.
Okay, the Swiss and transparency, a country that doesn't like being described as a tax haven but is regularly seen as one. Now it's handing over information to the Germans.
Oh, it's doing more than that. It's handing over cash. That's what the Germans want because obviously we're in austere times. The Germans are getting about 10 to 13 billion euros from the Swiss, which is a payoff by the Swiss to say, look, we're not going to disclose which one of your nationals are holding cash in our bank accounts, but we'll pay you a percentage of the amount that's in those accounts. So what it's saying is, we'll turn a blind eye to the criminality. Both sides are saying that, because actually what they're really interested in is not stopping the criminality. They're clearly, from their actions, interested in just getting money for that criminality and then having it continue, and probably in another 3 years they'll do another deal, because this has sent a very clear message. If you're German or anywhere else, you can still safely send your illegal money to Switzerland. It's a fantastic advertisement by the Swiss authorities to criminals and tax evaders around the world. We're not going to disclose things. We'll pay the tax for you to the authorities of your country.
Okay, on to good news for the American economy, and even better news for the presidential election campaign for President Obama. The US jobless claims are falling to their lowest level now since 2008.
And the President will take credit for it. He will not give any credit to Congress, despite the fact that these things are a joint effort in the American political and economic system. And he's timed it to perfection, he will claim. But also what's interesting, and it goes back to our very first story about Europe, one of the key reasons I'm not so worried about Europe is because the world's largest economy, well, largest equal with the EU, is getting out of the difficulties a lot quicker than us, and that will help export out of the EU.
Do you think there's anything to be learned from that, from what they're doing in America?
They're pushing their problems back for later on. What they're doing is spending now to create jobs, and the criticism is these are short-term jobs, they won't last, but if they boost enough confidence, they become self-fulfilling, because you start investing, you start spending, and spending has increased. Consumer confidence is the highest it's been since 2008. Spending's increased, but dipping in from savings. In other words, people are anticipating earning more. Whereas in Europe, what we're saying is, no, let's deal with the problem now. That means the pain lasts longer, and hopefully we won't have a bigger problem later. Now, if we can balance it up so that when they have their problem, we don't have ours, and when we've got our problem, they don't have theirs, hopefully it will lead to some kind of smoothing. Of course, it never quite works like that, but at least the American economy is doing relatively well. From a global perspective, that is good news for us in Europe.
But the point that Chris makes is interesting, because in British politics there is a lot of criticism that it hasn't emulated what's happened in the US. But we have an election year in the US. Next year's going to be potentially fairly tough when they start paying back that debt, right?
They will continue next year having the same problems they did in the first 2 years of the Obama administration, which is Congress will block any rises in the debt ceiling. Remember, they've got to vote for the rise in the debt ceiling. They will have governmental shutdown probably around December time.
We look forward to that.
Just after the election, and that's exactly what will happen, exactly what you said will happen.
Right, gentlemen, cover your watches.
Well, mine was a gift.
Mine was not as expensive as this one, was it?
From his wife.
30,000. Was it $30,000? This one is expected to be worth.
Yes.
That was not a gift from his wife.
I assume not. Now, if that figure is correct, and
now we know where all the money went.
Well, what concerns me, of course, is it's a man of God. And from the little I know, and it's Good Friday today, and the little I know about the Bible, it's not just Christianity, but all the major faiths, is that one is not supposed to be so attached to worldly goods. And there's a lot of good that can be done with such wealthy belongings. And I've never understood that about, and it's not just about Christianity, it's many faiths have this, is that sometimes you see the wealthiest people are those who are supposedly closest to God. And I just do not understand it, and certainly don't understand it on Good Friday.
Right, we must leave it there, but many thanks for taking us through some of the most interesting stories of the day. Alpesh Patel, thank you very much. Just a quick reminder of our main news this hour. A Russian arms dealer dubbed the Merchant of Death has been sentenced in New York to 25 years in prison. A judge in the United States sentenced the Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout to 25 years in prison. Latest headlines next.